It's Tuesday night. You've got 5 minutes. What could you do that's productive? You could design a new marketing campaign for a business you've been thinking of in perfect English or flawless Mandarin. You could design a logo for a new product. You could write up a legal agreement, get tutoring on a topic you've always been interested in. You could do all those things without hiring a lawyer or a designer. You could do it without any factory, without any office building, just with a data center that might be thousands of miles away. That is the shift that the economy is undergoing today. For millennia, wealth was tied to things you could touch, things you could drop on your foot, like steel or a cow or a car. Then came computers and the internet, and we started building a new economy based on bits, binary digits of information that make up software, platforms, and the data that we use in our daily lives. Now, AI is allowing us to not only use those bits to make up things, but also to do the work. AI is creating digital labor, so these bits are infusing the entire economy.
Data is a superpower. The more data you have, the more you'll be able to understand the shifts in the economy. And these shifts are happening quickly. Think about wealth as a wealth of information. How do you use the technology that's out there and the growing technology, the changing technology when it comes to AI to optimize your consumer purchases and your decision-making? I would think about power in the age of AI as given to those businesses that are embracing the AI tools, to those consumers that are actively using those AI tools to take advantage of the opportunity that's out there. This class is like an economic map for the moment that we're in. The goal is for consumers to be able to navigate this map.
The arrival of AI has been a complete game changer in terms of winners and losers, not just between countries, but also within organizations and different sectors. It is so important that companies are galvanizing employees and stakeholders and thinking about redirecting investment to capitalize on this important business transformation.
Tech is no longer limited to Silicon Valley or a handful of tech entrepreneurs. AI is infusing every industry, every occupation, every home across the world. That means that if you're a radiologist in Boston, AI is changing how you read the scans. If you're a farmer in Iowa, it's helping you decide how to plant crops. If you're a coder in Bangalore, it's helping you reach people across the world. My goal for this course is to get you to think about the economy in a fundamentally different way and empower you to have a much bigger impact on the world than you otherwise would. In this course, I'm going to show you how to audit your job so you can identify which parts AI will eat and which parts AI will augment. It's how the digital game has changed. You're also going to learn how to build digital assets that can leverage you and become a force multiplier. So in the transition, you'll learn how wealth and opportunity form. Then we'll get into positioning to stay on the upside. You'll be able to spot where wealth and power are moving before everyone else does. This is how you stay ahead of the AI curve.
In this class, I'll give you a peek into the decision-making and thought processes of economists and business leaders as we continue to navigate the AI landscape.
This course isn't investment advice, but it will help you understand where value is being created and where value is being destroyed. That's going to help you pivot your career, pivot your job opportunities, pivot your entrepreneurial ideas to the places that are growing.
You'll learn about how an economist is thinking about the transformation from AI technology, how it's changing decision-making and how it's transforming the economy, how it can change how you spend, how you find items, how you think about pricing, and how you think about the choices that you have in front of you. What I'll be teaching you in this class is how to use AI tools for shopping, to purchase. When you think about the availability of product, when you think about the pricing, when you consider the choices that you have as a consumer in the marketplace right now, AI can serve as a very powerful tool.
We've been through technological transformations before, and in each one, there were those who embraced the change and those who didn't. The secretaries who learned Excel became office leaders. The desktop developers who learned mobile became incredibly successful. The brand managers who learned about social media became CMOs.
Time and time again across the sweep of history, People who have leaned in early on technologies and learned what the value and proposition could be have been winners. One of the most amazing things about AI is how it's democratizing the access to technology and the ability for the average day person to create a job, to start a newsletter, and to basically build an opportunity for themselves. Some people will look at the changes that are occurring around AI and think that the world is coming to an end. But we've been through this before, whether it's cars or tractors, whether it's social media, the radio, or television, and transitions have only enhanced society. We shouldn't flatter ourselves. The world is not going to end in our lifetime.
We can already see the outlines of what's happening. And in this course, we're going to take glimpses at the parts of the future that have arrived and the parts that are yet to come. In the digital economy, we can all pursue the careers that we care about. We can pursue the leisure pursuits we care about. And my goal is to give you the tools so you can pursue those interests.
I'm Dambisa Moyo.
I'm Michelle Meyer.
I'm Eric Brynjolfsson, and this is Masterclass. When people ask me how long I've been working in this field, it's hard to give an answer because, truthfully, I've been thinking about AI and the economy since I was just a kid. I read science fiction books, and I thought it was so cool to be able to understand how the economy would change as artificial intelligence got better and better. When I decided to devote my life and my career to understanding how smarter machines were going to change everyday life. We're going to change the economy. We're going to change labor. And that's what I've been focusing on ever since. It used to be that you had to have a lot of technical skills to use AI and to build AI, but that's no longer true. Now, the language of coding is English. If you can describe your idea, AI can help you build it. That means that the limit is your imagination, not your technical skills. Start with some of these beginner, intermediate, or advanced AI tools, depending on your level of AI fluency, to turn ideas into apps without technical skills. Then turn those apps into businesses that could pay you back and build your leverage. I run into people who are really pessimistic about AI. They think that there's nothing we can do to stop it from turning into a bad outcome. I call myself a mindful optimist. That means I do believe we have the possibility of steering AI towards widely shared prosperity.
I've spent much of my career at the intersection of public policy as a member of the United Kingdom's House of Lords, in business on the boards of large global complex organizations for over 15 years, and as an economist, having written 5 books around the global economy, geopolitics, and macroeconomic investing. We are at an economic crossroads.
On the one hand, the global economy faces slower growth, higher inflation, lower economic opportunities, and higher joblessness,
potentially because of AI. On the other hand, we are at the beginning of what could be the most transformative period of economic growth that will enhance opportunities across the world. Of course, there's the risk that the gains accrue to only a small number of people in a small number of countries. But at the same time, AI could be so revolutionary in every aspect of the global economy, from public goods like education and healthcare to consumer goods and how we travel and how we eat, that it could be the beginning of a super cycle that will generate economic growth in a way that we cannot even imagine. I absolutely believe that in the context of the sweep of history, whether it's railways or roads, energy or smartphones, AI will transform how we live, work, communicate, and travel. One of the most amazing things about AI is how it's democratizing the access to technology and the ability for the average day person to build new products, to start a newsletter, and to basically build an opportunity for themselves. This is something that has not happened historically. If you look back again in economic history, you know that a lot of capital and resources were really left in the hands of the few. And really, the transformations of infrastructure and technology moved people from agriculture to manufacturing and from manufacturing into the service sector. But now AI actually disrupts all of that by giving people actual direct access to the fate of their futures.
One of the first times I personally appreciated the power of software was when I was in college and I made a simple little software program. We called it Dragonfire for playing Dungeons and Dragons. And we packaged it and it took off. People all over the world started using it. A couple of years later, I was visiting Greece and someone came up to me and said, "Oh, Eric, you're the ones who created Dragonfire." And I hadn't realized how many people around the world would use this software that a 20-year-old kid had been designing. That doesn't happen in the world of atoms, but it happens all the time in the world of bits. Every once in a while, civilizations go through dramatic shifts. The Industrial Revolution was one of those, where for the first time, machines started augmenting our muscles instead of us humans having to do the work. Now we're in an even bigger civilizational shift. Now machines are augmenting our minds, extending our capacity to make decisions and learn things. Most of the world is made of physical things, and physical things are made of atoms. Most of the value in the economy used to depend on atoms, things like steel, grain, cars, buildings, machines, all the physical stuff that we touched, that we built to create all the wealth around us. But now, more and more of the value is being made out of bits. The word bit is actually a contraction for binary digit. It's a way of representing information. Modern digital computers store all their information as bits. Everything's becoming digitized. Photographs, memos, audio, all that digital data is the lifeblood of machine learning. There can be bits that represent a photograph, a piece of text, an audio song. They represent different kinds of digital goods and services, software, information platforms, and ultimately artificial intelligence. You can make a copy of something made of bits for zero price. Bits are weightless. You can transmit that at the speed of light anywhere on the earth. Digitization is changing whole industries. When I was growing up, a physical newspaper printed on paper would be delivered to my doorstep. Now I get it digitally. That doesn't just mean that the same newspaper is delivered a different way. There are new ways for journalists to exist. Bloggers and people are doing research all over the world and posting that information on their own blogs instead of having to go through a big company. Kayak is checking airline reservations. ATMs are keeping track of bank balances. When you ride in a car and look at your digital map, Waze or Google Maps is keeping track of where every car is and where the traffic is backing up. Taxi companies are being transformed. Uber doesn't own any cars, but it's the biggest taxi network in the world because it controls the bits.
I'm a chief economist at the MasterCard Economics Institute. A recent survey found that 71% of consumers saying they'd like to use AI for search purposes. But there's a lot of uncertainties out there. There are a lot of changes. Technology is shifting rapidly as well. One of the interesting and really quite attractive things about AI is that it makes commerce safer, smarter, and more personal. Back in 2000, the share of retail spending that was done online was less than 1%. Today, it's nearly 20%. It shows that the economy has been moving towards more and more technology, more digitalization, and consumers have been moving a lot of their lives online. Retail is one of the clearest examples of this shift to digital power. AI provides a lot more information for consumers, and information can be very powerful when making decisions. It can give them ideas around the right price. It can tell them about choices that are out there in terms of the various products. And it reduces friction. And what that means is that they're going to be able to see what's out there faster, better. And hopefully that allows them to make better decisions in terms of how much they can spend, how much they want to spend, and how they value that item that they're looking to purchase. As an economist, we think about new technologies all the time. We think about innovation all the time, and we consider what it means for the economy. One thing really comes top of mind, which is the reduction of friction. And you can see that in terms of the reduction amount of time it takes to find the item that you want, to shop, and to engage in the broader economy. AI is a powerful tool. You can use it to search for the item that you want versus potentially in the past, we'd go to multiple stores to first discover if the product is available and then discover what the right price is. Now you can do that fast, and you can do that from your home. The other factor for AI, when you think about it from an economist lens, is that it increases competition. And here, I would argue competition is a powerful thing for consumers because ultimately it should lead to lower prices. It should lead to more competitive pricing in the market. AI will also provide greater choice for consumers, and that choice can mean a shift in the consumer basket. So while if you walk into a store, you may purchase what's there, and you may decide to utilize your purchasing power based off of what you see available at the price that you could afford. And you can really lean in to the areas of spend that matter most to you.
One of the things I'm most excited about is using digital data for education and learning. I'm a professor, and I teach dozens or sometimes hundreds of people at a time in a classroom. But there's research by Bloom and others that found that one-on-one tutoring is a much better way for people to learn. In fact, they can learn up to the 90th or 95th percentile by having one-on-one tutoring instead of being part of a class of 20 or 30. The problem, of course, is that it's very expensive to provide one-on-one teachers for every person in the class. AI is helping to address that challenge. Now, you can have an LLM, a large language model that gives personalized instruction for different people at the pace that the person wants to learn. Some people faster, some people slower. AI is personalizing learning, and that's leading us to learn a lot faster. These AI tutors aren't just for kids or beginners. Some of the smartest people in the world are using them. My friend Bengt Holmstrom is a professor at MIT. He's also a Nobel Prize winner. He says even before he gets out of bed, he will have a conversation with ChatGPT about quantum computers, about finance topics, about all these arcane things, and he was able to do it in a very engaging way. A lot of teachers are threatened by AI. One of my hacks was to create my own avatar, an avatar of Eric. It was trained on all of my writings and my lectures, and it could help the students with any questions they had. But it wasn't just for office hours. I also used it to help discuss their homeworks. Each week after a student wrote their assignment, they were required to have a 5 or 10-minute conversation with the Eric avatar. And the Eric avatar would, in real time, ask them different questions based on their assignment, based on what it knew about me, and they would have a conversation with it. Now, I resisted having the avatar do the grading. I thought that was not something that a machine should be doing. My great TAs were able to listen to the conversations and do the grading, but ultimately this turned out to be a great use of the technology. If you haven't done it already, I encourage you to have a conversation with an AI. One thing I've started doing is when I'm driving in the car, instead of listening to the radio, sometimes I will literally have a conversation with ChatGPT. I'll ask it about a research topic that I'm interested in. I'll ask it about something I saw on the side of the road and I want to understand better. And it's a way of constantly learning about what's going on in the world.
The world is split into two types of people, techno-optimists and techno-pessimists. Techno-optimists believe that there will be new opportunities that will emerge, probably jobs that are very human-centric, things like carers or negotiators, people who focus on diplomacy and human judgment. So those are areas where we can continue to see growth, whether it's in the healthcare sector or in education. On the flip side, techno-skeptics worry about the fact that in 2025, over 1 million jobs were lost in the US economy. But more poignantly, 55,000 of those jobs were attributed to AI disruption. So obviously, there is a concern that needs to be addressed and thought about when we think about what AI could do to the job market. A practical takeaway of the current economic backdrop where there are some job losses is to understand that it's not just only about AI causing job disruption. It's about other factors, perhaps business processes being improved. And this does provide an opportunity for each of us as individuals to think about how we can continue to add value to the organizations that we work for, or as entrepreneurs and people building out our new businesses.
When I was a kid, I wondered, would machines ever be intelligent? It turns out that a guy named Alan Turing first asked that question, and he came up with an answer. He said that we'll know if machines are intelligent if we have a machine that we're communicating with by teletype and a human that we're communicating with by teletype. And we couldn't tell which was which, that the machine was imitating the human so perfectly that it was indistinguishable. He called this the imitation game. We call it the Turing test. I thought that was a cool test, but it turns out that now I think it's actually the wrong direction. And the reason for that is if we make machines that perfectly imitate humans, it's not a high enough ceiling. We should make machines that allow us to do better things. Imagine if Henry Ford, when he was developing a car, said, hey, I'm going to make a vehicle that walks or runs as fast as a human. That would have been a little bit lame. But instead, we want to make machines that'll expand our possibilities, machines that can allow us to do new things we never could have done before. Secondly, when we design machines that simply mimic humans, it tends to drive down wages and increase inequality. The machine becomes a substitute for a human, and that makes labor less valuable. Instead, we should be designing machines that augment humans, that allow us to do new things and make labor more valuable. And finally, if you have a machine that imitates humans, it's going to make people unwilling to adopt it in their organizations. If you're the CEO or the head of technology and you're introducing a technology that most people see as replacing their jobs, they're not going to embrace it. That's why I think the Turing test is kind of a trap. If you make machines that exactly imitate humans, it's going to disempower us. What we want is machines that give us more power and more possibilities. The stakes are very high. AI is affecting jobs and careers. A lot of people are worried they're not going to have work going forward as AI transforms their industry. I've been talking to CEOs who are worried about their companies. They foresee more layoffs coming, in part due to AI. That anxiety is understandable. This is an amazing economic disruption, perhaps the biggest disruption that the economy's ever gone through. At the same time, there are hopeful opportunities. AI is creating new jobs and new things people can do. It's creating ways that we can distribute wealth. It's creating opportunities for entrepreneurship and innovation. No occupation is going to be immune. If you're a teacher, AI is going to help you design your assignments. If you're a police officer, it's going to help you solve crimes. If you're a physician, it's going to help you diagnose diseases. There's no occupation that AI isn't going to affect in the next 5 years.
Asymmetric information is a concept in economics where one side of the equation has more information than the other side. So think about, for example, if you are going out to purchase a car, the dealer will have a lot of information about that car in terms of what the value is, the durability of the car. You may not. AI search allows for more information, and importantly, it reduces asymmetric information. With AI at their fingertips, consumers are going to understand what the marketplace is calling for. They're going to understand if there's other options out there, and they're going to be able to potentially act on those other options. AI is changing how value is created. It's not just what we know, it's how we use that information. When consumers use technology, they enjoy technology, they find that it works, it betters the experience. Companies want to be realized online, they want to be relevant, and the more that AI is part of their business, the more that they can compete in this new technology.
One of the many things that machines can help us do to expand our possibilities is overcome what's called Polanyi's paradox. Polanyi was a philosopher, and he wrote in the 1960s about how we all know more than what we can tell. I know how to recognize my mother's face, but I can't tell another person exactly what to look for. I know how to tie my shoe, but it's very hard to write the instructions down in a document on how to tie a shoe. Machines can help us overcome that by using machine learning. Computers are able to capture some of the information that previously was tacit, that we never wrote down, by observing us, by using digital data. And that allows us to expand the kinds of things that we can share with other people. The key to really avoiding the Turing trap is adopting what I call the centaur mindset. Centaurs were these mythical creatures that were half human and half horse. The modern idea of a centaur is something that's half machine and half human. Not literally, but having a machine and human work together to solve problems. At Stanford, we're creating a new set of benchmarks for artificial intelligence that are not based simply on how well the machine can do by itself, but how well the machine and human can do working on a problem together. For instance, some of these very powerful radiology machines that are able to recognize cancer were not very effective when used in hospitals because they weren't really working closely with humans. But if they adopt the centaur mindset and think not how well does the machine do by itself, but how well does the machine do when it's working with a human, then you're more likely to get a radiologist to use the system. It needs to be able to have a discussion with the doctor and explain its reasoning so the doctor can decide whether or not to follow the instructions or overrule it.
Harvard and Wharton published a study on AI's impact on P&G, who used to be called Procter & Gamble, to basically assess what the impact of AI would be on the improvements on the team. The Harvard-Wharton study concluded that two-person teams with AI produce superior ideas and results. What this says is that AI can help improve workers and can be a vital piece of a modern team. The most important takeaway is that it's not about AI replacing the human worker. It's about AI becoming a complement to the human worker. And this is really important because the onus still is on us to continue to build the tools and understanding of how AI works.
Augmenting means allowing you to do something new that you never could have done before. So if you're trying to do an algebra problem and the AI helps you do that, then you've been augmented. If you're simply handing off the task to the AI and it's doing it and you're not doing anything, then it's substituting for you. The nice thing about augmenting is it allows us to do new things that we never could have done before. One of the things that people get wrong about AI and technology more generally is when they see it helping with a task, they assume there's going to be less demand for people in that task. And that's sometimes true. For instance, with agricultural equipment, it allowed farmers to do a lot more, and we went from having 90% of Americans work in farms to 2%.
And we know what happened. People moved out of agriculture into manufacturing because of technology. And that has happened as technology deployment has continued to occur and the global economy has continued to move forward and progress.
But in other situations, making something cheaper and faster and better actually increases the demand for it. For instance, when ATMs were introduced, it didn't lead to reduced demand for tellers. It actually increased the demand for tellers because now banks could do so many more services and people went to banks more frequently. The lesson from the ATMs and the bank tellers is that technology can actually create more jobs and more value. When things become more productive, that means that there's more output per unit of labor. Now, one possibility is you keep the same amount of output and you have fewer workers. But another better possibility is you keep the same number of workers, but you have more output. When jet engines were introduced in airlines, it made pilots much more productive. But that didn't mean we had fewer pilots. It led to an expanding set of people flying. We all fly a lot more than we did back in the 1950s and 60s, and that led to growing demand for pilots. Similarly, today, AI is leading for new opportunities in marketing, in creative areas, in design, and that's not reducing the demand for people in those areas, it's actually increasing the opportunities. In my company, WorkHelix, I spend a lot of time talking to CEOs and other people's organizations about introducing LLMs, and I can always tell when people are going at it with too much of a simplistic cost-first mindset. I understand when the chief financial officer wants some hard numbers and they want to see whether or not the LLM is paying off, and most of the time they define that as reducing employment, reducing costs. And I have to say, there is some value from that, but ultimately the biggest value comes from creating new opportunities for customers, new goods and services, allowing the employees to do new things that they hadn't done before. It's not from cutting costs, it's from increasing the revenue side, it's from increasing the value side.
It wasn't too long ago that everyone was talking about STEM and how important it was to focus on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics as areas to pursue. Although, of course, those areas are very important for the global economy, it's absolutely clear now that with the advent of AI, a lot of the routinized tasks and jobs that humans were doing are now being replaced by tasks and jobs that are done very easily by AI. People were so focused on how getting coding skills was going to be so critical for having a career in the future. But today, there's so many questions around the importance of coding because AI systems are already doing a lot of the work that coding and coders were doing a few years ago. There should be no doubt about the fact that AI is going to disrupt not just the global economy, but a multitude of sectors, both public and private, over the next decade. Areas such as healthcare, education, national security are all going to be impacted. And really trying to figure out what aspects of these areas are going to change will be critically important for understanding not just your individual career, but how the world will get better over time.
We know there's a lot of investment around AI when you look at the amount of data centers, CapEx, all of the companies that are out there actively creating the tools and the infrastructure for AI. But the enthusiasm around it is essential because that's how it actually enters the real economy. AI enthusiasm will tell us quite a lot around how consumers are engaging with the technology, how everyday businesses are engaging with the technology, and how it's actually making a difference to everyday purchases and everyday companies. What we do at the Mastercard Economics Institute is measure the spending from consumers and businesses on AI tools, whether that's software, whether it's gen tools, a variety of different ways of engaging with the AI technology. We look at it on a per capita basis for a variety of countries. And it is certainly a global phenomenon. But another really important part of the story is to look at how that investment is actually moving into the economy through adoption. Adoption is a key signal of how value is beginning to shift. It's not new that consumers are shopping online in order to find better value, more options, choice in what they purchase and how they purchase it and when they purchase it. And AI technology is only going to speed that process along, create even more choice for consumers, and allow them to hopefully optimize their purchasing power. When you think about AI technology, oftentimes people think about the large companies, the hyperscalers that are active in this space and are doing a lot in terms of driving the technology. But it's also really important to think about how that's transmitting to the economy. And one of the ways it's transmitting is through smaller companies that are thinking about the CapEx that they need in order to bring this technology into their business to be competitive in this space. One of the incredible stats that came out of our unique insights is that in the US, of the new businesses formed, 44% of those businesses were online only. For certain industries, it's even bigger. Take the travel industry, for example. Travel agencies, increasingly online. Over 80% of new businesses in that space was online-only presence. When you see the extent to which business creation that is online or omni-channel, it allows for more flexibility. It allows for those businesses to reach a broader set of customers in a way that was a lot harder to do for small businesses and new businesses in the past. But at the same time, small businesses face some real challenges in terms of being able to absorb the new technology as fast and as seamlessly. Small businesses need to be savvy here. They need to think about what their competition is doing, what the larger businesses are doing, and how they want to use this powerful technology to reach their customers and continue to grow.
The demand curve is one of the most basic concepts in economics. It's basically the relationship between price and quantity. The way it's typically drawn is prices on the vertical axis, quantities on the horizontal axis, and the demand curve is downward sloping. That means that if you lower the price a little bit, you're going to have more demand, more quantity purchased. It seems natural that when the price of something goes down, you spend less on it. But it's also possible that when the price of something goes down, you end up spending more on it because it's so good you just can't get enough. That is Jevons paradox. When jet travel got cheaper, we ended up spending more on it. But when the price of eggs goes down, you end up spending less on eggs. Today, AI is making all sorts of goods and services cheaper than they were before. They're making coding cheaper. They're making designing logos cheaper. A modern version of what we're seeing with Jevons paradox is what's happening to the price of artificial intelligence. Every year you can get a model that's just as good as last year's model for 10 times less. You might think that means that the AI companies are getting 1/10 as much revenue as before. Actually, they're getting more revenue than before because when they keep lowering the price of intelligence, the demand for using those systems goes up and up and up. The other side of Jevons paradox is Baumol's cost disease. Bill Baumol was an economist who looked at the way the economy was evolving in the 60s and 70s, and he noticed that the most productive sectors were shrinking while the less productive sectors were growing. And that's not good for an economy if more and more people are working in the less productive sectors. Ideally, we want an economy that has more productivity, but also, like Jevons paradox, has more total output. It all is going to depend on how steep that demand curve is. In Baumol's cost disease, the demand curve is very steep, so that means lower prices lead to very little increase in output. In Jevons paradox, the demand curve is very flat, and that means lower prices lead to more total output. One of the interesting things about how AI is affecting different jobs is, unlike earlier technologies, the ones that involve the most human touch are actually the ones that have the greatest staying power. People don't want to just interact with a machine when they're getting child care or when they're getting elder care or when they're getting counseling. They more often than not want to have a real human on the other side of that interaction. Jevons paradox and Baumol's disease help give us a map to where the good jobs are going to be. If you're in a sector with growing demand, the way Jevons paradox describes it, that means you're going to have more and more good jobs. Even though the technology is advancing, it leads to more demand for what you're doing. On the other hand, if you're in a sector like the ones that Baumol described, then technology is something that leads to lower demand, and you want to stay away from those. One of the things that's become clear to me is that we're not ready to just turn over the keys to the LLMs or artificial intelligence to be making decisions for us. We need to keep humans involved. We need to have humans and machines working together. When I'm doing my research, I make sure I check everything the LLM is telling me. It'll help me brainstorm. It'll help me come up with new ideas. But I also know that ultimately I have to be the one who's responsible for the output of everything I produce. And that's the way it is right now. We've got LLMs that are super powerful in certain areas, but the frontier is very jagged. And there are places where humans need to step in and take accountability.
As businesses and organizations are changing so rapidly in this era of AI, it's an important question to ask, what actually should I be doing? It's going to be very important to focus on skills that will be durable for the next 10 years, skills that are net value add to the organizations, but also making sure that you're acutely aware of the skills that can be replicated by AI, thereby freeing up more time for you to do the things that only you can uniquely do.
Here's a helpful 90-second diagnosis.
Write down the skills and aspects of your day-to-day work that you think AI could replicate, and those that are unique to you, ways in which you add value because you're a human.
In economics and business, there's this concept called a J-curve.
And a J-curve is basically, like the shape of the letter J, a period where investments don't pay off. So you have to invest and wait for the period from which you start to see the returns on your investment. If you think about the three key drivers of economic growth, capital, labor, and productivity, productivity has an outsized role to play in delivering economic growth. The reason for so much excitement around AI is that it promises to enhance productivity gains. And if you look, for example, at some of the growth forecasts, such as PricewaterhouseCoopers, which expects there to be $16 trillion of new GDP by 2030, a lot of that is going to come from us performing our work much more efficiently, which is an enhancement in productivity.
The reason we call it the productivity J-curve is that if you plot the productivity or the output over time, at first it actually falls and then it takes off. The lower part is while you're trying to figure out those new business processes, you're actually spending more time and effort than you did before you started because you're not only producing the output, you're also trying to figure out what new skills you need.
Many companies struggle to get past this J-curve period because investors are impatient. And so it's really important for boards and leadership teams of companies to stay the course and to really think about how and when we can derive the most benefits from AI, because that can help to settle the markets. The idea of a J-curve absolutely also applies to the individual. Learning the tools, buying the tools, that actually for a long period of time seem like a net negative before the payoff actually emerges. It's absolutely important for individuals to stay the course and to push past this hard period, because fundamentally AI will transform how we live and how we work. And you want to be part of the conversation, but ahead of the curve also for when it becomes much more widespread.
I think most of us have seen the J-curve happen, not just in organizations, but in our own personal lives. I was learning how to throw a football in a different way. My coach was telling me a different way of holding it, and the first few throws were worse and worse than they were before. I had to learn new techniques and ultimately took advantage of this new approach and got to be throwing the football better than I did before. But there was an initial dip while things got worse. The same thing is true for businesses. If it's a well-organized company, everybody just knows exactly what they're supposed to do, and they do it practically automatically. There's not a lot of oversight that's needed. But while you're going through a transition, there is a lot of oversight. Management has to get involved, and there are a lot of decisions to be made. Another lesson of the J-curve is you need to make time for learning. You need to make time for changing processes. If all you do is buy the technology or start using the software without really investing the time in retraining, you're going to be stuck in the early part of the J-curve. Advances only come when you make those complementary investments. We call them intangibles because they're not hardware and software that you can easily measure. They're business processes, culture, and skills. They may not be something you can touch, but they're just as important or more important than the technology itself. The J-curve can be discouraging for companies. I've talked to CEOs that are upset at their team because they're stuck in the low part of the J-curve. It can be discouraging for individuals, whether you're learning sports or learning how to use AI in your own work. You're going to go through this lull where things are not working as smoothly, where you're just incompetent at trying to get things done. But that's natural, that's understandable, and most people vastly underestimate how important it is to power your way through that and to learn the new skills to take advantage of the technology. Very rarely is it true that the way you were doing things previously will work just the same way with AI. In most cases, you're going to have to adapt your processes.
There's a debate on how best to deploy AI and AI tools across an organization. Some people will say it should be much more laissez-faire and that individuals should learn the tools as and when they feel up to it. However, there's a different viewpoint that companies and organizations need to deliver and deploy AI throughout their organizations through brute force. What does brute force look like? It might mean mandatory training. It might mean the deployment of new tools on how people are hired, promoted, and evaluated in terms of their performance. Recently, UPS's CEO, Carol Tomé, announced 48,000 job layoffs, which actually translates into an 8% increase in the share price. The CEO was very clear that those job losses were attached to new tools and new processes that were coming through that would be much more efficient based off of AI. I'd like to think that really the market was rewarding UPS for becoming more innovative and leaning into the AI world. The announcement from UPS about layoffs has a real clear message for us as individual employees. The employees that are going to survive are people who are not just doing routinized, regulated work all the time. It's about becoming much more savvy and much more adaptable, as well as adding value in an AI world.
The very first paper I worked on ultimately became known as the productivity paradox. One of the Nobel Prize winners at MIT made this observation that we saw the computer age everywhere except in the productivity statistics. What he meant was that computers were everywhere in the 1980s. It was even on the cover of Time magazine as the machine of the year. Yet at the same time, productivity was not growing. The official statistics showed very little growth, and people weren't really that much better off. That was a paradox. How could you have this amazing technology, but no improvement in productivity? So he asked me to look at it. And we did a bunch of research to try to understand what was going on. And one of the things that we found was even when there's an amazing technology, there are lags before it translates into big benefits. Sometimes those lags can be as long as a decade or more. One of the reasons there was a productivity paradox in the 80s and early 90s was that people were buying computers, but they weren't rethinking their organizations. There had to be a process of re-engineering the corporation to take advantage of it. When I did research to try to understand the productivity paradox, I realized that this had occurred over and over and over again. Every big technological revolution, from the steam engine to electricity to computers, had their own productivity paradox. For instance, when electric motors were first introduced into American factories, productivity did not increase. In fact, it didn't increase for 30 to 40 years. Why did it take so long? Before they introduced electric motors, they used steam engines. And those steam engines would power the system. But the way it worked, you'd have one big steam engine in the middle, and you have a bunch of pulleys and crankshafts all connected to the steam engine, powering all the equipment. And they were usually multi-story because all the equipment had to be as close as possible to that steam engine. You couldn't spread it out on a single floor. Otherwise, the pulleys and crankshafts would be too long and they would break. So then they started electrifying the factories. They took out the steam engine and they got the biggest electric motor they could find and put it where the steam engine was. And they hooked up all the same pulleys and crankshafts. Did productivity grow? No, not really. Not much changed. It was kind of the same factory as before. So they started building entirely new factories. What they looked like was often a single story spread out over multiple acres, where each piece of equipment had a separate electric motor. And now they didn't have to arrange them based on the power source. They arranged them based on the flow of materials from one item to the next to the next. Did that increase productivity? Oh my God, yes. They doubled, they tripled productivity. The lesson is not just that it takes a while, but that simply the technology by itself is not enough. You have to combine the technology with new ways of thinking, new business processes, new skills, even new goods and services. I don't think anyone would say, hey, electricity was just a fad. It's just that initially it wasn't being used effectively. By the same token, today, with computers and with artificial intelligence, we're not getting the full value out of them until we figure out the new business processes, the new culture, the new skills that are needed. People need to learn new routines when they use technologies, and whole economies need to restructure to take advantage of the technologies. So whether you're looking at the level of a company, an individual, or a whole economy, productivity J-curve is an important part of understanding the dynamics of technical change. In a modern economy, digital capital is becoming more important than physical capital. Companies can be built with just a handful of people using digital capital and scaling up very rapidly. It's a new kind of economy. It's a faster growing economy. It's one that almost anybody can play in. Digital capital can give companies so much leverage because sometimes a very small investment can allow you to reach people globally. If you want to build a new physical factory, that takes a lot of bricks and mortar and machinery. That's very expensive. But if you want to replicate digital capital, you can do that much more rapidly. Consider CVS. CVS had a way of doing prescription drug ordering that they reorganized, and after much experimentation in one store, they figured out a way to make it way more efficient. Once they had it worked out in that one store, they could embed it in their information systems and then replicate it to all the other stores. As a result, that more efficient prescription drug ordering system ended up working all across their company, and that gave them a competitive advantage that individual companies wouldn't have been able to match. Every company has a lot of unique data about their customers, about their business processes, about their suppliers, about their workers, and that data can be used to train an LLM or to fine-tune an LLM in a way that they create value that no one else can match. If you know more about what your customer likes and dislikes, you're going to be able to tailor your products in a way that somebody buying an off-the-shelf LLM isn't going to be able to match. To do this yourself, create a custom GPT and compare it to the output of regular ChatGPT. Then pick a context or field to focus on training your GPT for. Next, paste instructions into the GPT, like you're a strategic advisor for a business. Only use internal data provided in your knowledge base. If data is missing, ask clarifying questions before answering. Provide specific, actionable recommendations. Upload your data for it to analyze and test it out. Ask what should be improved, launched next, how revenue can increase, or where value is declining. So when you train AI on your data, you create differentiated value. Generic AI gives general answers, but custom AI creates a competitive advantage. And once deployed across your team, that advantage scales. In every industry, there are some companies that get it and some that don't. Back in the 90s, Kmart and Walmart were fierce competitors. Walmart understood that using the technology, you also had to change your business process. They came up with a lot of innovations. They called it cross-stocking, vendor-managed inventory. Walmart used digital systems to better understand what was on their store shelves, and then they connected that to their vendors. Kmart bought the technology, but they didn't make those process changes. They thought, hey, if we buy the shiny technology, we're done. It turned out that simply buying the technology without making those intangible investments didn't give them the payoff they were looking for. Today, Kmart is gone, and Walmart is the world's biggest retailer.
So When you consider consumer shopping, one of the areas that really stands out for consumers as an incredible use case of AI is grocery shopping. Consumers often buy the same basket every week. It's a repetitive purchase, but it's not a subscription purchase. You still will go to a store or you'll look to purchase online. And we do very strongly see evidence that AI is an area that can optimize this for consumers. It can save time. It can help find the best price. It can help find the best item that they're looking for. When AI optimizes something as routine as groceries, that's real leverage. When you think about at least for me, my Sunday afternoon, stocking the fridge for the week, I'm often buying the same items. Maybe I'll change it up here and there. I'll have an idea of the different food items I'd like, but I'll also have an idea of the price that I want to spend at the end when I check out. And when you have AI at your fingertips, you have the ability to really optimize. You have the ability to not only find the best value for the food that you purchase, gives you more choice, and it saves time. Consumers want choice. They want to feel like they're getting value for the purchases they make. And AI can drive that. The companies that are embracing the technology, that are allowing consumers to be savvy in their purchases, are those that are likely to succeed in this new frontier where AI will be an essential part of the consumer spending journey. When you think about cross-border transactions, and that could be that you want to purchase an item from another country, or you want a certain type of food or furniture that you have your eye on that is only available in another country, in a world of AI, you can discover those items a lot easier. You can trust that you're going to be able to get the right item that you have your eye on, and you probably feel a lot more comfortable with the commerce as well, knowing that you have AI in your back pocket helping you through that transaction. Take, for an example, a designer that you love in Italy. You can't get to Italy in time for the event, but you can search and you can find that item online, and you can proceed with a transaction that you feel like you can trust in and that you feel like you'll be able to get the item in time for the big event that you have. That's new. That's technology working for us.
One of the amazing things about the digital economy is you can create so much value at literally zero cost. Think of Wikipedia. You don't have to pay for it. And for some people, it's pretty valuable. I've talked to people who'd be willing to pay $5, $10, $20 a month to have access to it if they had to, but they don't have to pay anything. That difference between what they'd be willing to pay and what they're actually paying is called consumer surplus. It's the surplus that a consumer gets of value beyond what they're actually paying. People get a lot of consumer surplus from digital goods, but they also get consumer surplus from conventional goods. If you have to pay $6 for a cup of coffee, but if push came to shove, you would have been willing to pay $10, then you're getting $4 of consumer surplus from that coffee. The difference with digital goods is that the cost is often literally zero. Back in the 1990s, I had a CEO visit my class at MIT, Robert Rodin from Marshall Industries. He told us that customers were just insatiable. They wanted goods that were free, perfect, and instant, and it was just unachievable. The interesting thing about digital goods is they hit all three of those. Once you have the original copy, you can make an additional copy for no additional cost. In addition, each copy is exactly identical to the original copy. That's not true with photocopies, that's not true with cars, but it is true with digital goods and services. Finally, you can transmit those digital copies at the speed of light, essentially instantaneously. Because of the special economics of digital goods, very small companies can create billions of dollars worth of value. Companies like Figma, Replit, Instagram, they have small teams, but they're reaching thousands or in some cases millions of potential customers. That's a huge opportunity. If a small team can reach millions of people, that means each of us has the potential, if we have a good idea, of really changing the world.
This is called vibe coding, which you can use to build an app. It's so easy to vibe code and create an app in less time than it used to take. Just describe the app you want to build in plain language, what you want it to do or solve, who it's for, and the features you want, then generate the working version. Here's an example. I want to build a travel-friendly running app where a user types in a city and gets the best long-distance running routes. The routes should use publicly accessible streets, and safe pedestrian areas, and show nearby coffee shops and public restrooms along the way. Users should be able to choose their distance, see the route on a map with elevation and difficulty, and save the route. The goal is to help marathon training runners quickly find safe, convenient routes with useful stops when traveling. You'll see it built the app fast, no coding required on your part, and you can see the prototype designed. When you're ready, publish or share it out for people to use.
Consumers have a variety of items they purchase. A routine purchase is one that is typically a necessity. You're gonna buy it on an everyday basis. You can think about it as stocking the necessities in your home. That could be toilet paper, paper towels, tissues. Spending on an experience tends to be more personal, oftentimes more strategic. The travel that you're booking, or the restaurant that you want to go to, or the concert that you are dying to attend. AI has an important role to play in both. When you consider how AI can help for the routine purchases, the necessities, and those that maybe you simply want the lowest price, it allows you to have more choice. It allows you to have more competition, and hopefully allows you to get the best value and therefore the lowest price for those items. AI can be a powerful tool for the experience economy as well. When you think about a concert, you want to be able to get a ticket to the concert, the time that you want, and the price you want, because it might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Iconic example of that is the Eras Tour, Taylor Swift's concerts, which people travel the world in order to see Taylor Swift perform, and were willing to pay a considerable amount of budget to do so. As we look ahead and AI becomes more commonplace, it should allow for greater engagement in these experiences, more discovery, easier logistics, and potentially a better and more seamless experience. Agentic commerce, or AI systems, plan and execute purchases with minimal human intervention. Take, for example, a big milestone birthday. You can use agentic commerce to not only help find the outfit you want to buy at the right price that you want to spend, but also could take into account considerations around the weather, the venue, the vibe of the party, and then actually execute on that transaction and be your real support as you're going ahead and planning that party. It's still a new and growing technology, but it's one that can be extremely powerful in terms of the buying decision and the buying action. And that's important to keep in mind. Consumers will not only think about AI in terms of the search process, but they'll also think about it in terms of executing on the final purchase.
If you're in a small town and you're the best doctor or the best tax accountant or the best taxi driver, you can do a bit better than the next best guy or the 10th best guy, but you're not going to own the whole market. It's different though with digital technology. If you make the best medical software or the best tax accounting software, or if you become the Uber of taxis, then you can win a much bigger market. And the second best guy is not going to get nearly as much. And the 10th best guy, they're probably going to get next to nothing. That's the economics of superstars. That's the economics of power laws. The reason that superstar economics are getting more important is because we're moving from atoms to bits. With bits, you can make a new copy of whatever you're making at very, very low cost. The best doctor or lawyer can only serve so many clients, but if you've got great software, you can make more and more copies and capture virtually the entire market. So being a little bit better translates into a much bigger market share, maybe even all of it. And that's the essence of winner take most markets. One or two winners at the top get the lion's share of the benefits. Digital markets tend to be superstar markets.
The Magnificent Seven refers to the dominant 7 companies that are absolutely centered to the technology revolution that we've been witnessing over the past decades. These include Amazon, Alphabet, Apple, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Tesla, Facebook,
But perhaps less known and less appreciated are the new upstarts that are really part of the conversation. A great example is OpenAI, a company that 5 years ago didn't exist, but it's challenging big technology stalwarts like Google and their search engine. And it's now become, with its ChatGPT, a household name. This is a company that has shown that innovation and entrepreneurship is alive and well and can actually challenge the status quo.
The other side of digital economics is while there are some superstars at the head of the market, there are also a long tail of people filling in little niche opportunities that may not have been worth pursuing before, but now with digital economics, it becomes very cheap to go after them. And that leads to what we call the long tail. This pattern, where you have a few winners that dominate the market and a long tail of niche markets, is called a power law economy. What it means for day-to-day people is that, yes, it's great to be the winner, but there's also a ton of opportunity in the long tail. There are niche opportunities that would not have been worth pursuing before. For instance, if you're writing a book, today you can sell it on Amazon and they carry millions of titles, a lot more than any physical bookstore would have been able to carry. Maybe your book isn't something that would reach millions of people, but it would reach a few thousand people and reach that audience through Amazon in a way it couldn't have in a conventional bookstore. There are more and more marketplaces that cater to these niche markets. Think of Etsy or eBay as an example. If you have a product that's relevant to just a few people, Etsy is a way for you to be matched to those people. Think about music, obscure songs. Think about YouTube, where somebody has a video that maybe is reached by a few hundred or a few thousand people. Sure, it's great to be the superstar, but there's also lots of opportunities in the long tail. In these superstar markets, we're seeing a winner-take-most economy where a few people become billionaires, centibillionaires, and maybe someday even trillionaires, and a lot of other people struggle to get by. One of the things about a superstar economy is the winners aren't always the ones that work the hardest or even the ones with the highest agency. There's usually an element of luck as well. And that means taking more shots on goal give you more chances of becoming one of those superstars. One of the things I'd like to see in our economy is have more people have a chance to take shots on goal. There are lost Einsteins all over the country that potentially could create valuable companies, but they don't have access to the tools, they don't have access to the opportunity, so we miss out on the benefits that they could create, and they miss out on the opportunity to become a superstar. If we had an economy that created more equal opportunity, that would benefit all of us, and it would give everybody a chance to be one of those superstars. One of the things we're seeing with power laws is not just that there are certain people or certain products that end up being superstars, but sometimes whole regions can pull away from others. There's a positive feedback loop. For instance, in Silicon Valley, wealth begets wealth. People start ideas, people start companies, and then they make money, and then they fund companies for other people, and it attracts more smart people to work on those projects, people from all over the world, and it creates a positive feedback loop. One of the reasons I came out to Stanford was because I wanted to be in the middle of Silicon Valley. That's where a lot of these ideas are being created. But I also understand that being the hub of innovation right now is no guarantee of future success. Detroit was the Silicon Valley of the early 20th century. That's where all the smart engineers went to build this new technology called cars. But that was no guarantee that they would stay on top forever. There's no guarantee that Silicon Valley or Shanghai or Bangalore or any other region is going to stay on top. It requires constant innovation. But the great thing about digital goods is that they can travel all over the world. You don't have to be in Silicon Valley to benefit from them. When I was at MIT, I helped create something called the Inclusive Innovation Challenge. And we had people from Africa, from Asia, from Europe, from South America, as well as North America, each doing competitions where innovators created new digital goods. And each year, dozens of stars were created, each serving thousands of customers. So this innovation ecosystem was global, not just local.
AI AI can serve many different purposes. On the one hand, it certainly can help increase choice for the purpose of finding greater value, lower prices, budget-saving techniques. On the other side, AI can be very helpful in terms of being able to locate a special item where maybe you're not as concerned about the price, but you're very concerned on making sure you receive the item that you want.
AI opens options, but businesses still have to choose their market.
Circular shopping, or more broadly, the circular economy, is the reuse rental economy. Consumers that are spending on the rental services for fashion, for sporting gear, for furniture, or buying used items. The circular economy is very much present, and we can see it in the luxury fashion market. For total online spending for luxury fashion, 27% is defined as circular, the reuse, the rental market, and it's growing at a pretty healthy clip. The fact that we're seeing a pretty notable growth in circular shopping tells us that consumers want choice. And I think that relates back to AI and technology. The more savvy consumers are, the more options they have to make sure that they get the price that they want or the item that they desire, the more I think it gives the economy a lot of momentum to move forward.
The world of bits instead of atoms hasn't been created yet, but we can see the outlines. And it's up to us to shape it in the direction we want. The vision that I'd like to see is a world that Andy McAfee and I call Digital Athens. We wrote about it in our book, The Second Machine Age. In ancient Athens, they studied philosophy, art, literature. They were able to do that in part because there were thousands of slaves doing all the manual labor that needed to be done. Andy and I imagined a digital Athens where we had all the good parts without the bad parts. We were still able to spend our lives philosophizing, creating art, playing and singing with each other, doing the things that we wanted to pursue, but instead of the bad parts. We could have digital tools, AI agents, and software that were creating most of the value in the economy. And that way, everybody would have access to food, clothing, shelter, all of the necessities, and we could focus on the things that we really want to focus on. One of the things we're all going to have to recognize is that the era where you were educated for your first 18 or 22 years and then relied on that for the next 40 years in your career, well, that era is gone. That means that we're all going to become lifelong learners. There's a tendency to try to freeze things into place, and when change is happening, try to slow it down. That's the wrong instinct. What you actually have to do is lean into the dynamism and try to figure out how these technologies can allow you to do new things rather than hang on to the old. I'm constantly having to reinvent myself. The skills I learned in grad school are not the ones that I'm using today. Today, I get to use AI to help me with my econometrics, even to help me with my brainstorming and researching different topics. It's kind of fun, but it's also a little bit scary. But in my industry, every year is different, and that's constant change. It's something I lean into, and it's something, for better or worse, we're all going to have to start leaning into. One of the concerning things I've found in my research is that young people are having a harder and harder time finding jobs, especially in the most AI-exposed occupations. In a paper called Canaries in the Coal Mine with Bharat Chandar and Ruyu Chen, we looked at how many people at different levels were getting hired. And what we found was that kids aged 22 to 26 were much less likely to get hired, and senior people were still hanging on to their jobs. Well, what was going on was that AI in many cases was replacing the kind of tasks that the junior people were doing, but the tips and tricks about how to be successful that the senior people knew were still pretty valuable. My concern is that now we're eliminating the base of the pyramid. It's turning into a diamond instead of a pyramid. That means there's not going to be people later on who are ready for those mid-level and senior level positions. So we need to rethink the way that we hire people and the way that we reskill people so that everybody has an opportunity. AI is creating a challenge, but AI also can be part of the solution. What we need to do is think about ways of using AI to teach people the skills they need in order to have those more senior positions. AI can do a lot of work, but it can also be a great teaching tool. And companies that are smart will be using AI not simply to replace the workers, but rather to train them for the new roles.
If all that you have is a job title, then you're vulnerable in an era of AI. The fact of the matter is we're now all going to be judged on how well we're able to adapt and learn in a period of fast change on the technological side. Our ability to enhance our contributions to the organizations that we work in, or even if we're entrepreneurs starting our own company, will be evaluated on how quickly we understand and use AI. Of course, in an era of AI, the individual also has hidden assets. You have a brand, you have a reputation, you have skills, you have a body of work, you have experience, and you can show human judgment in the things that you've been doing. Some of the skills that you build are about getting certificates or proof of learning, but it's also about the work that you've done, the things that you have actually produced. There's also value in what you've learned, how you interact with people, all the aspects of soft skills and engagement as you think through your customer base and the organization in which you work. Another crucial piece of the AI era is your ability to learn and adapt. Think of yourself as being premium insurance to the company. You know the processes, you know the values of the organization. That has immense value, even in an AI world, because ultimately that will separate the winners and the losers. It's not just about replacing the routinized work or the human worker. It's about someone being the guardian and custodian of the values of the company.
When people look at AI growing more powerful, they often feel like we as individuals become less powerful. Actually, AI is a tool and we're becoming more powerful. We have more options. That means that if you want to change your career, if you want to influence thousands, millions, even billions of people, you can do it today in a way you never could have before. That means you need to identify not just the tools that you want to use, but how you want to use them to leverage some special skill or insight or interest of yours. If you can dive in deeply and identify something that a lot of people are interested in, you have an opportunity to reach them. And if you're not sure what those interests are, you can even use AI to help you identify those opportunities. Do a brainstorming session with the AI, talking about your skills, your interests, what you want to achieve in the world. Having those brainstorming opportunities will likely unlock some possibilities that you never saw before. There's no such thing as a job that's suited for AI or a job that's immune to AI. Every job is a bundle of tasks, and every job I've ever looked at has some tasks that are relevant to AI and other tasks that aren't relevant. You may be a truck driver, but figuring out the truck routing and scheduling things, those are things that AI can help with. You may be a doctor, but there's the personal parts of the interaction that AI cannot help with. Now, it's true, some jobs have more of those tasks and some have fewer of them. But when we looked at 900 different occupations, 18,000 different tasks, we didn't find a single occupation where AI ran the table and could do every single task. And we didn't find a single occupation where AI couldn't do any of the tasks. All of them were a mixture. AI is the most powerful tool that humans have ever had. With AI, you can change the lives of literally millions or billions of people. With that great power comes great responsibility. It comes with the opportunity to change the direction of history by using that power to create widely shared prosperity, to create more wealth and longevity, to help the environment, to alleviate poverty. I believe that as the technology becomes more powerful, our values matter more than ever. We all need to think about what we want that technology to do, both as individuals, as organizations, and as a society.
There are at least 3 ways in which AI could impact inequality. First is inequality between capital and labor. If it turns out that labor actually is impacted as people who are doing routinized work become more laid off, then of course we could see a widening of inequality between people who hold capital and people who offer labor. Second is the difference in inequality between developed and developing countries. We could see countries that are investing and are leaders in innovation around AI leap far ahead than countries that are way behind and just don't have the investment capital to basically double down on AI. Finally, we could see enormous inequality between high-skilled workers and low-skilled workers. And this is really important for all of us because we can all become high-skilled workers if we really understand how to use and deploy AI tools.
The one thing you should remember from this entire class is the economy is changing in a fundamental way from being based on atoms and physical things to being based on bits and information. Information can travel at the speed of light. It can be copied perfectly. It can be copied at 0 cost. That means you can leverage yourself in ways that previous generations never could have.
AI is here. It's in your everyday life, whether it's searching online for a new item to purchase, whether it's looking for advice. A lot of that is being already queried through AI, and it's getting even larger over time. My hope is that you feel more comfortable with how AI is changing the economic landscape, how it's impacting your consumer journey, and how it's benefiting your spending decisions on an everyday basis.
You know, technology is not destiny. We shape our destiny. As the technology becomes more powerful, that means our values matter more. And one of the most important values we need to think about is whether we're going to use technology mainly to replace people, to automate tasks, or whether we're going to use technology to augment and complement what we're doing. If we race against the machine doing the tasks, then in the end, we're going to lose. If we use technology to help us, if we race with the machine, then we're going to be able to reach new heights and new possibilities that we never reached before.
The time is now. We all should be absolutely spending our time getting much more to grips with AI, the different tools, learning how they work. Of course, people talk about prompting, but it's more than just about prompts. It's about actually understanding what aspects of AI can replicate and perhaps in a more efficient way do the things that we're already doing, which will free up more time for us to do the things that we can uniquely do as human beings.
Right now, you have almost infinite possibilities ahead of you, and you don't know exactly which ones to focus on. I suggest using AI to help you make those choices. AI can research different product ideas if you want to be an entrepreneur. It can research different industries if you're thinking of where to go for your next job. It can research which courses will help you fulfill your goals if you're a student. In each case, having a dialogue with AI can help flesh out the possibilities. You want to make AI your partner in your journey. I challenge you to explore those possibilities, and I bet you're going to discover some new options. I believe there are more possibilities today than there were a decade ago or 100 years ago. It's a great time to be alive.